Welcome, ladles and jelly spoons, to a very special retrospective review. For this September marks the 25th anniversary of a handheld games console that hoped so hard but failed so badly, despite having handheld versions of some of the hottest games around, such as Duke Nukem 3D, the Mortal Kombat trilogy, and even Resident Evil 2. But when you mention it, some people out there have not even heard of it. Ladles and jelly spoons, we invite you to sit back, relax, maybe even have a brew as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Tiger GameCom.
GameCom active.
Help here. Hello? Hello? I have a surprise for all the slackers, but nothing better to do than play games and surf the net all day. GameCom! Lay those bloodshot eyes on these babies! It speaks!
Let's rock.
Begs to be touched! Wires you to the internet! And it plays more games than you idiots have brain cells! Any questions? Does it play? Idiot! Next question! How about compatibility? Question! How much does it cost? Let's get 'em!
GameCom, the ultimate portable gaming system.
GameCom active.
The year is 1997 and fans of video games are very well pandered for in the home console market, with the Sony PlayStation, Nintendo's N64, Sega's Saturn, and even the 3DO and Atari Jaguar can still be found in a few homes. But what of the mobile or handheld gaming market? Whilst Nintendo's Game Boy was still the world's most popular handheld and the Sega Game Gear was eating its way through as many batteries in a day as the Game Boy had top-selling games, it certainly felt as though the next mobile handheld was just around the corner. And whilst it would be some time until the Neo Geo Pocket and the Game Boy Color would hit the shelves, and even the Sega Nomad wasn't really making any marks on sales of the Game Boy, or even the Game Gear for that matter, even Nintendo managed to score something of an own goal with the Virtual Boy. The handheld market was ready for a new generation of handheld, and who better to deliver it than the company that had been constantly putting out LCD handheld ports of the home console's biggest titles, Tiger Electronics. Enter the Game.com. No, Pat, it's just GameCom. Alright, lad, but I mean, there's clearly a dot in title. The Game.com is a 5th generation handheld game console released by Tiger Electronics. A smaller version, the GameCom Pocket Pro, was released in 1999. The first version of the GameCom can be connected to a modem for internet connectivity. Hence its name, the Game.com. It was the first video game console to include a touchscreen and the first handheld console to include internet connectivity. The GameCom sold fewer than 300,000 units and was discontinued in 2000 because of poor sales. But the GameCom wasn't Tiger Electronics' first attempt to dip their toe into the home console market. Back in 1995, they had released the R-Zone as a competitor to the Nintendo Virtual Boy. And can you believe it, the console sold even worse than the Virtual Boy. So it was back to the drawing board for Tiger. Rather than going back to making basic LCD screen adaptations of video games, they set their sights on knocking Nintendo's Game Boy off the top spot and announced the GameCom. Tiger Electronics stated that the GameCom would change the gaming world as we know it, and promising that it would be one of the summer's hits. The one thing that it did have going for it was that no other console was releasing in 1997, so at that year's E3, that's the Electronic Entertainment Expo, for those of you taking notes at the back, don't worry, I have seen you. There was a certain amount of positive buzz around it, with the press saying that it was the most interesting handheld device on display at E3, and describing it as a sort of Game Boy for adults. The system launched in the United States on September the 12th, 1997, with a retail price of $69.95. Here in Blighty, it was $79.99, so you know, more than a bag of chips. Lights Out was included with the console, and Solitaire was built into the handheld itself. Out of the box though, the GameCom wasn't internet ready. It relied on a cartridge that would be released in October of 1997. Tiger also launched a website for the system at the domain game.com. The console release marked Tiger's largest product launch ever. The system launched with a major television advertising campaign in which a spokesperson insulted gamers who were asking questions about the games console, while stating that it plays more games than you idiots have brain cells. Publication at Games Radar was very quick to point out that calling your target audience idiots probably didn't help matters when it came to the poor sales of the console. The GameCom came in black and white with a design similar to Sega's Game Gear. It had a larger screen than the Game Boy as well as higher resolution. The GameCom included a phone directory, a calculator and a calendar. All the things the kids wanted back in 1997. To be fair, it was aiming for an older target audience with its PDF features. The console design was intended to be simple and cheap to keep costs of the units low. The problem was that when you got your hands on it, it sort of felt a bit cheap as well. That didn't stop it though from having some interesting features. The console includes 2 game cartridge slots so that you could store 2 games for ease of use, but this also enabled the GameCom games to include online elements, since both a game cartridge and a modem cartridge could be inserted at the same time. If you didn't have a modem cartridge, Tiger produced the Complete.com, a serial cable allowing players to connect their consoles to play multiplayer games. Did you know, lad, that the Game.com was the first video game console to feature a touchscreen? It was also the first handheld video game console to have internet connectivity. More you know. The GameCom was also the first handheld gaming console to have internal memory, which was used to save information such as high scores and contact information. With the GameCom not setting the handheld world on fire the way Tiger had hoped it would, they set about developing an updated version called the GameCom Pocket Pro, and it was shown off at E3 1999, along with several future games. It was set to release in June of 1999 for just $29.99. Taking a note out of Nintendo's book, the new console was available in 5 different colours: green, orange, pink, purple and teal. However, the Pocket Pro lacked a colour screen and had a reduced screen size, as well as only 1 cartridge slot. The GameCom Pocket Pro included a phone directory, calendar and calculator, but lacked internet capabilities. Effectively, the Pocket Pro was just a souped up Game Boy Color, and despite several games based on popular franchises and being a hell of a lot cheaper than the Game Boy Color, the video game playing public were not convinced. The GameCom console line failed to sell in large numbers and was discontinued in the year 2000. Although the idea of a touchscreen would later be used by Nintendo for their 2004 handheld, the Nintendo DS. Ultimately, the GameCom was the little system that almost could back in 1997, but it was hard to see who or how anyone or anything could knock Nintendo's Game Boy off the top spot in the handheld market. The GameCom had some nice ideas and really was a innovative little console when you think of mobile gaming today, but back in 1997 the tech just wasn't up to scratch. Text-based internet was never going to appeal to the kids, and whilst Tiger always said they were aiming for an older demographic, the older demographic were either people who played games and had no time for the PDA functionality, or people who would use the PDA functionality but had no time for the games. The GameCom is often to be found on lists of worst gaming consoles of all time, but since the retro boom has really taken off, I see it less and less referred to as a disappointment of the handheld gaming space and more as a novelty, and I think that's the best legacy the GameCom could hope for. So then, are you old enough to remember the GameCom way back in 2002? Maybe you owned one thinking that it was going to be the next big thing in handheld gaming. Sorry. If you did own one though, I would love to hear from you in the comment section down below. But that about wraps it up for this month's retrospective review. There's just enough time to answer the questions from last week's quiz. Now, question 1, the collective nouns. Well, of course it was a pride of lions, a covey of baked beans and a herd of Mr. Bees. Now, most of you got pride of lions, a few of you had a covey of baked beans, but none of you have heard of Mr. B. I have. Great airy fool. This will never do. So I do encourage everyone watching this video to go and check out Mr. B's ukulele channel. There's a link in the description down below, and as Pat says, be sure to tell him that we sent you. Now, back to the questions. Question 2 is, what do you do with it? Well, of course the answer is you stuff it, either with cap on or feathers, not sage and onion. Now, I would have accepted down, but on no accounts up. And with that, if you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to share it out with your nearest and dearest. If you're not already, then please do consider subscribing for more retro gaming shenanigans every week, and check us out on other social media platforms. And finally, consider this. Is it worrying that what doctors do is called practice? Cheerio, see you next week.